Hey, welcome back to Coding Grade 12s. If you've looked at the reading that I posted on the website, you should have reviewed the basics of variable declarations in simple math. Remember, our analogy from last year was that a variable was a box or a briefcase that stores a value for us, like a security deposit box. Anytime we can put a new value into the box, but we can only store one value at a time until we cover arrays later on, obviously. So if we put a new value in, it erases whatever was in there before. At any time, we can take whatever's in the box out to use in our programs. But because Java is a strongly typed language, we can only store one type of data in the variable, and we have to decide what that variable type will be at the start. So again, in the reading, if you looked it over, you should have seen a summary of some of the basic variable types that we covered last year. So Boolean, true or false value, string, which is text, int, which is a whole number with no decimals, and then double, which is decimals. So when I want to create a variable, when I first declare it, I have to tell it what type of value I want to store. So for example, we have an int there, which indicates that I want to create a new variable that stores an integer, and then I have to give it a name. And as always, at the end of every statement, I have to do a semicolon to end it. Anytime I want to put a new value in, I would say variable name equals, and then I put the value in. So if I wanted to make a string, I would say string name semicolon, and then later on I would say name equals, and then in quotes, Mr. Sasevich in there. And we'll see a couple of those as we go through. And then if you reviewed the reading, you should have seen some basic math stuff that, again, we covered last year. So let's get coding. I've got my NetBeans IDE open, so you can use NetBeans, or if you have Eclipse or any other Java IDE installed at home, you can do this in the same way. So I'm going to create a new project, and a little different from last year. We created a class library and created a file that had some code in it. We're just going to create an empty shell of a program. We're going to create a basic Java application. I'm going to give it a name, so I'll say grade 12 first program. And it's a good idea if you're on the school computers to make sure it's pointing to the H drive so you know where it's saving. And then I made a directory called My Programs where I store all my programs. You can do the same thing. So we finish, and here's our basic program. So remember, we are going to be reviewing classes and functions later on in this unit. This is my program. It's called grade 12 first program. Here's the opening curly bracket, and there's the end of the curly bracket. So everything in between here is my program. And then you can see that NetBeans creates one basic function for us, which is called the main function. And this is where our operating system looks to look for commands to actually execute for our program. We're not going to put anything in here other than, and you're going to get used to this because we're going to do this for all the grade 11 review projects, so we're going to do this quite a bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an instance of our grade 12 first program. So since I called it grade 12 first program, I'm going to copy that, equals new. Okay, and then you can see if I run it right now, because I haven't told it to do anything, it doesn't do anything. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a empty constructor, which is again the same name as grade 12 first program. It's got no inputs. And don't panic if this seems a little complicated to you right now. Like I said, later on in the unit, we are going to review functions and classes. So this is where we can actually start coding. Okay, so this is where we can actually start coding. And if you remember our handy system.out command from last year, we always start off with our hello world program. So now if I run it, you see our program actually does something. All it does is it prints out hello world on the bottom. Again, don't worry so much about this. You're just going to end up doing that on every project. So whatever the name of your program is, you're going to say name of program equals name of program A equals new name of program, which is just like a variable declaration. Again, we are going to review that later on, and as well as functions. So we're ready to start declaring some variables. We will cover local and global scope again later on this semester again. But just to remind you, very basic, if you put something at the top of your program, it's global, it goes into every function. If you put it at the top of a function, it's only available in that function, it disappears, you can't access that variable anywhere else. So since we talked about the age variable, I'm going to create a new box in memory, a new briefcase in memory to store an integer. I'm going to call it age, so I want it to be an int, so I say int age, and that's it. So right now, there's a box in memory that's holding nothing for me because I haven't put anything in. I don't use it anywhere in my program, but it's there. Remember, it's a good idea when you create your variables to actually give it a value. So I'm going to say 65, run it. Again, I don't use it anywhere in my program, but we can change that. So if I want to access what's inside my program, I can say I am age Okay, so if I run it, you can see hello world. Now I access that age. It says I am 65 years. Now I defaulted it to 65 at the start, but at any time in my program I can change that number. So if I want to make myself back in my 20s, I should do this before I print it. Age equals 21. See, my program will now say I'm 21 years old. Now remember, it executes these commands in order. So if I run this program, even though if you looked in memory and you saw it, you would see that my age is actually 21 because I printed this out before I switched it. The 65 appears in my program. Okay, so hopefully you remember that about following in order, and you know, everything's executed step by step. So at this point of the program, right here, age is 65. On the next line, I set it to 21, and I never really end up printing it out again. But if I print it out again, we can verify that my program is now saying I am 21 years old. Okay, now on top of that, I can do some fancy formatting things. Remember, with system.out.println, I don't have to use print line. I can say print, which will start to print everything on the same line. Okay, and you'll notice that everything is printed on the same line right now. So you can see with print, instead of print line, everything prints on one line. What I can do is some handy formatting things. So I don't know if you remember this from last year, but if I say /n, that's just another way of saying enter. And if I say /t, that adds a tab. So you can see a tab space appear in there. Okay, so we've created our first variable, we've assigned a value to it. So remember, if you want to assign the value, you're just saying age or the name of the variable equals and then whatever value. Things to remember, Java is case sensitive. So age, all lowercase, is a different variable name than age with a capital A. And you'll notice it'll give me an error. It says variable age cannot be found because I don't have an age variable. I have a variable called age with no capitals. Okay, so I do lowercase. And remember, proper variable names are letters or characters. I can't have, obviously, special characters in there. I can have numbers. I can't have hashtags or anything like that. I can't start a variable name with a number because that'll give me an error. So I can have age2 now if I want. And if I capitalize something, if I want to access that variable later on, I have to make sure that I capitalize it the exact same way that I did at the top, or it'll give me an error saying it can't find that variable. Okay, so if I hover above it, cannot find symbol, which means can't find that variable. I haven't declared a variable age2 that's all lowercase. So I can get rid of that. So now we can do some simple math. So I'm going to say, try and do a prediction of what my mark is going to be in this class. So I'm going to say integer mark. I'm going to set it to 100. And then I'll say integer final mark equals, actually I'll leave that blank. I'll make a string variable, call it name. And now the other thing to remember here, and say notice I'm saying print this line plus the name to it, and you'll see my name is null. Because right now null means there's nothing in there, and that's why it's a good idea to always put a default value into your variables when you declare them. Okay, so here's all my 4 variables that I've declared so far. Here's my output for my program. Looks ugly. I should add some spaces or a /n to add a new line, or switch that to a print line. So there we go. So now let's do some basic math to do some calculations. So I want to predict my final mark. So final mark is equal to, and I can access other variables to use in my math. So I can say my final mark is going to be whatever my mark is now minus my age, and then I can do system.out.println predicted final mark plus final mark. So you'll notice it'll do the math. Okay, so my predicted final mark is a 79 because my mark was initially 100. I subtracted my age. Remember, it's not 65. At this point in the program, I've switched age to 21. So that's how I get to 79. I can do addition if I want to do addition. So I'll do adding. See, my final mark will be 121. I can do multiplication. And then the interesting one to remember is division. And remember, because we've declared these variables to be an integer, it doesn't store a decimal. So it'll do the division, but if you actually calculated this using a calculator, you would get a decimal for this. You wouldn't get exactly 4. But because I'm storing as an integer, it chops off the decimal and just stores the integer. So if I wanted decimal, I would have to switch all of these to doubles. And then when I run my program, you'll see now I get a decimal answer. Last note about proper formatting. Usually I like to put all my variable declarations at the top of my program, or if I have it inside a function, I'll put it at the top of the function. So that'll show the difference between global and local. We'll talk about that later, but these variables are all global to the program, so they'll be accessible in any function that I create later on, which again we'll cover again later on, so don't panic if that's sounding difficult to you right now. In addition, for formatting, remember from last year, every time I do a new curly bracket, I tab it 1 over so that my program is readable. I don't want programs that look like this. I want nice spacing where everything is tabbed over. So every time you start a new curly bracket, you tab 1 more to the right. And every time I start a new function, you see for our main function, because we start a new curly bracket, I tab another 1 over to the right, and then I come back out when I end my curly bracket. So on the e-learning site, I will be posting an assignment for you guys to do. Before you get to that assignment, here's your challenge, and you have to show me these challenges completed before I let you work on the homework. Good luck.